Hi, my name is Bobby. I'm sitting today here with James Loveday himself at his amazing new place in Ballarat. James has always been very insightful and very knowledge sharing person in the NDIS and entirely in a healthcare sector. He is one of those people who's always learning, always you'll see at different expos, seminars, workshops, learning some new knowledge which he understands that he doesn't have. And of course, at another one, he would be sharing all that information openly with everyone that he meets out in any of the networking events or the knowledge sharing panels and podcasts. And uh, you've seen him everywhere. Today, I'm sitting with James to learn a few more ideas within the India sector, what's missing, how his journey has been, and how we are looking at NDIS sector and the entire healthcare that it is connected with, including the allied health and the other industries and professions, leading to in the future. So, James, give us some of the background on the current scenario and what's changing.
What's changing? Look, I think what's changing is that, look, 40 years ago, we had an international push around something called a social model for disability. And it wasn't until the NDIS that we really got a grasp of that, I feel. And I think what's changing is that society doesn't understand what that is. And we're getting a lot of pressure to to look at what the medical model offered and what we can go back towards. I think people feel like the medical model was cheaper um, from a government perspective, from a kind of a broader community perspective. Um, One of the other things I think is really changing is that at the start of the NDIS, there was this massive amount of positive influx and positive stories that were being put out. And due to a very, very small part of our industry being a little bit corrupt, ripping off investors, ripping off participants, we've got a really, really negative, a lot of society has a really negative opinion of our industry. And I think that it's putting a lot of downwards pressure on the government, a lot of downwards pressure on organizations, really to prove themselves. So I feel like we're in a midst of having to prove ourselves as organizations. And within that, I feel like the salesy tactics that some organizations have taken have really shot themselves in the foot, and that we really need to go to a stage as organizations and businesses within this kind of disability space where we're proving we're doing the right things. We're not just saying it.
It's very interesting when you say that. There's a lot of different ideas that's coming to my head, being in the sector from nearly about 8 years and going through so many different things. But let me ask you this: when you say about the pre-NDIS arena or the times when people had access to more of the medical services and they are expecting more of the similar sort of outcomes in the medical setup,
I
is it because of, could it be because of so much is changing within the NDI sector to protect those rights of those people with disability? But or is that something as an outcome of the general mindset of the people outside, because of the number of providers who are adding up and who are not reading enough to really understand what it means to be an NDIS provider or working with a person with disability, and the entire idea is getting somewhat distorted along the lines.
I, I, at risk of making you look a bit silly, um, Bobby, what the medical model is, it has nothing to do with medical. It's a model of support where in the past we saw people with a disability as needing to being sick in theory, and needing to be put away like someone would be in a hospital. Where the social model is a contrast to that, where we see them as being a part of society and embedding them into society and societal change. I think where a lot of organisations have gone wrong, and a lot of people within the NDIS has gone wrong, is that um, they've done their research over the last 10 years. They haven't looked at what the history of disability movements are. And anyone that understands the history of disability movements within Australia and internationally would not are succeeding because they understand the full premise and the full timeframes around how the NDIS came in. People that have entered the NDIS post the NDIS, they weren't there pre, really don't have a strong understanding of the other movements that came for the NDIS to be here. They might have seen the the political push and the campaigns, but they don't understand what the movement was. And they don't understand the other movements that had to happen prior to the NDIS being here and the movements that are still happening. People see a lot of the conversation that's happening at the moment around politics and organisations going, we're going to lose this, we're going to lose that, as a movement. That's not what the disability movement is. That's a business thing. And a lot of people are approaching this from business. They're not looking at disability movements and social movements.
Give us something more about those disability movement, what you just brought up.
The thing is, I don't know a lot about it. And I actually think to really go into that, you need to speak to someone who was a part of that movement. I understand it from a very kind of spectatorial approach. I watched that movement happen. I watched people within my life of working with people with disabilities be able to gain a voice, to be able to gain choice, to be able to gain self-dependence. But the way those movements actually happened were highly technical and highly orchestrated from an academic perspective, from a social perspective. And I've never been someone that's been highly academic. And prior to the NDIS, I was probably someone that was I was a support worker. I was just on the journey of the people I worked with. I wasn't so much looking at it from a business or a social perspective. So I think if you really want to understand what those movements look like, you'd need to speak to someone that has a disability that's been a part of that movement. I think I would not do it the respect that it's necessary.
Now, we've been having some of those chats in the last, the event that we had a couple of days ago. There was a lot of those insights shared with the gaps from perspectives about a participant and the family members, and from the provider's side and what's changing. We had a lot of those discussions as well. Going into the current area where everybody's looking at that particular disability movement, but not going into the disability movement, what it is and what it means and where it started from, and how people really want NDIS to come back to those to supporting the people with any sort of disabilities or challenges, which I generally like to put it. What's changing with the current scenario with so many different providers? We hear that it's nearing to about 300,000 NDIS service providers in the country. What's changing?
In relation to direct support models, I feel like some of we see a lot of media around quite large organisations shutting down, and we're talking like institutionalized, or not institutionalized, that's the wrong word, organisations that have had massive strongholds within their community. We've got organisations that are 40 to 50, 60, 70 years old looking at leaving this industry. This is something that I think the NDIS thought about right at the start, because we did have a specialist funding for those organisations to transfer them over. So for every hour they were actually billing more than new organisations to help with the kind of organisational change. I feel like some of these organisations didn't want to pivot, didn't want to change. They had 40, 50 years of having a certain way of doing something. And the reason they've shut down is because they haven't been able to pivot their model to an open market. They haven't understood what this market is, and they haven't understood how to keep their participants happy, because the way they used to do it, they believed it was keeping their participants happy. So within these bigger organisations that are shutting down, within the smaller organisations that are shutting down, we also have to understand that a lot of businesses within the first 2 years do not succeed. That is not just an NDIS thing. That is just generally a new business thing.
That is absolutely a general business understanding, a lesson, and everybody has to understand that. You don't break even until 2 years or 3 years being into the business, but you have to give it your best for that period of 2 years or 3 years, and keep pushing it.
And I feel like there's some I feel like the reason some people have started, there's people who started organizations for the total wrong reasons. They've been there for a total, for profit, for, oh, I can make money out of this. It's business growth. It's a new market. I don't want to touch on them. But there are people that have started organizations that have started them for 100% the right reasons. We've had nurses that have seen participants go in and out of hospital and go, you know what, in the community, I could do way better, and this person will never come back to hospital. We've had social workers, we've had psychologists, we've had support workers that have just been so disenfranchised by the way in which their participants were treated that they've decided to start their own organizations.
It does.
Small organizations.
It's a quite a very difficult balance for even me to sometimes really put together in place in the business, in the office. Because one side there is a social perspective, or the participants side and the family side, what they're expecting from a certain service with a given pool of funds, what they've been allocated by NDIS. But taking some of the decisions which within NDIS guidelines as well, sometimes we have to say no to a particular request, which we can go back to the NDIS guidelines. Okay, this is your limit, or this is where your boundary lies, and you cannot overstep. You have to no to a particular service request no matter what. But then there is another aspect or a dimension to the businesses which drives your decisions based on the costs and investments and the hierarchical structures that we have to really maneuver around to make sure that everything is everything is running in a proper balance, whether that's a service delivery or whether that is the people inside. It's not only the other side itself. It's a hard balance to do, which I totally understand. Structuring those fundings over a period of a week or 2 weeks over a month, that works for a participant and the family over a period of discussions in the initial stages when we finalize our support plan. Now the NDIS has brought in that 3 months and 1 month plans with the blockchain models with the NDIS fundings. How is that affecting the providers and the participants and that service delivery from your point of view and your understanding?
From my point of view, in the organisation that I work for, it's not affecting us whatsoever.
Yeah,
it's not affecting any of our SIL homes in any way whatsoever, because in theory, what should have been happening in the future, if someone had 12 months worth of funding, in theory, most organisations will be like this much a month. Okay, this is how much they'd have per month. So per month, bam, 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 bam. To me, that's what the NDIS has just kind of brought in.
Let's talk about Let's talk about the political side, or the side from the NDIS Commission, on how things are changing, and how do you see what's coming next for the providers from the political side of NDIS or the NDIS Commission, who mean well for the NDIS participants, keeping the primary purpose of bringing NDIS into effect?
So just to paraphrase, you want to know what I feel like the Commission's going to do in the future? Is that what you're asking?
Not what you feel like, because that would be quite very interpersonal in the way.
Yeah.
Coming from the social background and all your history.
Yeah.
But more on the practical insights, what you've seen, what's coming. Absolutely.
So I feel like my insights say to me from the conversations I've had with people is that, and the people I've spoken to that now having a more political conversation, more powerful conversation, a lot of them are talking about residual sectors that sit around the NDIS. We're not so much talking about the NDIS.
It's very interesting, a few things that you said. I definitely can come up with a 10 different questions, and it's going to be never ending. Going from the larger perspective about NDIS, let's come down to a little bit more focused area, Ballarat, where you are based, where we got the facility where we are sitting today.
Yeah.
Tell us something about the Ballarat, because sitting in a regional area or a city like Ballarat, it's very different from how different larger metro cities are structured, even around within NDIS and healthcare systems. So how is Ballarat?
Ballarat. Okay, so I can probably sum it up with why this building is the way it is and why we've pushed this building to be what it is. So because I worked in youth arts for a long period of time, and a lot of that is about community consultation, I feel like a lot of organisations look at what a business model is, but they don't look at what the community needs. So what a community needs from one suburb to another suburb in Melbourne is vastly different. But what the community needs in Melbourne to what it needs in Ballarat is vastly different. They might need the same services, but it's more about the approach. So at T&K, where I am now, and we are an identity before diagnosis company, and it kind of pulls in the whole concept of why this centre is the way it is that when we decided, so we have a lot of participants we support with neurodiversity, with mental health, with drug addiction. We have a lot of participants that sit in the criminal justice system as well, and a lot of participants with mental health, if I haven't already mentioned that. And they spend a lot of time at home in their own heads. And they can't get outside of their own heads. They're at home. They've normally come, Ballarat is not something I would say is high socioeconomics. I wouldn't say it's low socioeconomics, but it's it's built on mining. It's a working class, labour-driven style approach to life. And
which certainly changes the entire community perspective.
It changes the community perspective, yeah.
From the metro cities that we see otherwise.
Yeah, and so when we looked at what Ballarat needed, we looked at what our participants needed. Our participants needed somewhere to go during the day, somewhere where they could go, hey. So when our support workers go, hey, let's go out today, the participant isn't going, well, actually, I don't have any money, so I can't even go to McDonald's. I don't really.
That happens a lot in Ballarat.
Well, it just happened. I think I've been I was a support worker for 20 years. You know what I mean? There's a lot of that everywhere. But you know, having a disability means that a lot of people I know that have disabilities are living on the poverty line. They don't have the money to be going out, so they just sit inside their own house and gestate. And for people with neurodiversity and mental health, that is really detrimental.
I've seen that a lot as well, even in Melbourne Metro, where we service, and that adds to deteriorating mental health for a lot, many, even within NDIS, within NDIS sector, the participants or their family members, or even the people who are not within the NDIS sector. That happens a lot.
So we looked at it and went, well, what do they need? They need a hub. They don't need a day service, because day services historically, day services run from 9 till 3. Historically, day services are basically based on a time model that is like going to school, 9 to 3, and you have your school holidays, which I think is not age appropriate for adults. So we wanted to not call it a day service, we wanted to call it a hub. We also wanted a space that was open. So a lot of, we had our open day a couple of days ago, and what a lot of people said is, your space is massive.
It definitely is. I've seen around, and there's like hundreds of things to do here within a small space when somebody sees it from the outside.
One of the other differences that we realised in Ballarat is that, more, not so much Ballarat, but working with our participants, is that if I say to them, so if you say to one of our participants, what are you interested in? They'll say, oh, nothing. Okay, well, that we get that a lot everywhere.
Absolutely.
So we wanted to build a space which wasn't based on interests. It was based on, I don't want to use the word goals because I hate that we give people with a disability goals, but so it's based on ethos, it's based on theories, it's based on future planning. So instead of saying at 12 o'clock on this day, we do visual art, we do painting, what we say is on Mondays, our whole day is focused on building community capacity. How we get to that end game really depends on the individual person. Because if I say, oh, we're doing a music, a band, session, if you're not into music, you're not going to attend. So you're automatically excluded by having a heavy set program. Where if we have a space where we're working towards a concept, so say someone comes for 1 hour or they come for 6 hours, we're working on a concept. Our supports are working with them on how do we get you to your next goal. So it might be so one of the guys we're working with at the moment is younger. He's had a very, very traumatic life, and he finds it really hard to share space with people. Extremely hard to just if like sitting next to him, he finds it really, really hard. He's obviously had something in the past that's triggers him. So everything we do with him is focused on him getting more used to sharing space with people. So it doesn't matter what that activity is, as long as we're working towards him sharing space, we're hitting what he needs. So we do gaming with him, but we control the space where if he wants to game, he has to share a couch with someone. Okay. We do visual art with him. We make sure that whenever, if he goes out for a cigarette, that there's always someone else in that space. It doesn't matter who it is. So he's just getting used to sharing space. And then when he goes home, he shares no space with anyone. He goes in the community, shares space. And over time, we've built capacity with him being able to share space with people. Some people would say that he is not tolerant of other people. I would have never said that. He just does not know how to share space with other people.
Sometimes it's not
So
only
it's an approach, not
yeah,
an
sometimes
activity.
it's not only him. Sometimes it is also the approach from the team or the support providers, how they interact with the person and they break ice.
Yeah,
How do they enter that boundary of
yeah,
the personal space,
yeah,
that aura, and really make a change? So the person becomes more accepting about having another person into his space or
yeah,
in a close proximity,
yeah,
and that becomes a very progressive approach.
yeah,
If the way you would deal with somebody and the way I would deal with somebody, that person may be more accepting of you,
yeah,
maybe not me.
yeah,
And when I try to enter that space and I'm entering that space with a completely a different perspective and a different persona or a different conversation,
yeah,
that may go sideways, which makes a lot of difference. So the team that you have, it's definitely it is something that goes with a single mindset, and different people go with
yeah.
a single understanding on how to really approach the person and strike that conversation.
Yeah. One of the other things we saw starting a service in Ballarat is that we needed to be very local. So our head office is in Ballarat, which is halfway between Bacchus Marsh and Ballarat. And people go, why do you have an office in a small town? Well, that's where the organisation started. That's where the heart of the organisation is. And it's very important for us to keep that heart. We could just move our whole office to Ballarat, but it would lose the original ethos of being an organisation, a small country town, looking at what that town needed. And one of the other things that we very much looked at in Ballarat is what are the support staff needing? So we noticed that there's a huge cohort of people in Ballarat that work in disabilities that have a vast amount of lived experience, especially in the mental health space. So we saw there was a lot of workers that have who suffer from mental illness, who have suffered from mental health. We've that have neurodiversity. That we've got workers where they've had family members commit suicide and they've had to deal with that. We've got support workers where they've had family members that are actively within addiction or have been in addiction in the past. And we wanted to build a framework around those support workers where they feel comfortable to work, because they make our participants really comfortable. Because we had that conversation. We had that panel the other day, and there was a lady on there with dissociative personality disorder, and she was talking about how this really good support worker she had, and how she's never asked her anything about her mental illness. Our support workers won't ask about your mental illness because they already know what your mental illness is and they've seen that already within society. So they don't have the intrigue because they have the knowledge behind it. So it makes you feel really, really comfortable, because when you're, and that's what you need in a small town, you need to feel extremely comfortable. Because one of the other big things is if you're someone with a disability in a small town, everyone already knows you have a disability. So the participants we work with, there is a social stigma already around them because society has seen them on the streets. Society, the whole town has seen them on ice. in the middle of the road. You know what I mean? So there's a stigma around them. So
It makes it very difficult for
it
a
makes it
person to
very
speak up.
yeah. Well,
Uh,
speak out, but it's
or have another person address that to them. It makes them uncomfortable.
yeah, it
It
makes them
happens to all of us.
yeah, it happens to everyone. But in a small town, like it's like I live in an extremely small town.
There's a lot more to talk about, but we need to be more mindful of the time and the
Yeah,
length of the entire
I
conversation
did
that
tell
can go
Bobby that he
online.
can ask me whatever he wants and it'll
Yeah.
just flow. But
I really would love to hear a lot more, and that can definitely end up for the rest of the
maybe
day with
after
us.
this, once he does the extended thing, send him some questions, and next time he can have some really the audience come questions. Bobby can ask them. Okay, no
Absolutely,
worries,
we
go
can
for it.
certainly do another recording and share all those insights for what everybody does want to hear from you. There's I've always seen that every time we're out at a gathering, everybody's got a lot of different questions to ask you. That okay, if nobody knows, and James would know, and we'll go out to James and we'll ask this, we'll ask that, and we'll get to learn something different. And when they leave you from that conversation, they go up having an answer to their question, but a lot more ideas and questions that they really want to think about and
I
come
don't think
back.
I propose. I don't think I answer questions. I think I my goal is to provoke self thought. So when someone leaves, they go, "Oh, I didn't think about that,"
That's
and then
exactly what
they think a
happens.
lot more about how they do stuff. Because I feel like a lot of people when they ask questions, they give you a solution, and then people just copy that solution. But my solution is not your solution. Like it
Exactly.
can't be done. But if I provoke thought in the question, in the answer, you go, "Oh, James thought about it like this," or "But I would have done it like this," or "Oh, I know someone else who would have done it like this," and then at the end of that, you've thought about 5 different ways to approach it, and you've come up with the best way that you would do it, which is
Exactly.
more what people are asking me is
It is entirely
how do
about
I
a
do something means not how I do it, it means how you would do it.
it is entirely about that individual journey what somebody needs to be
Mm.
mindful of. And somebody comes out to me and they ask me, okay, Bobby, how do I do it? I was like, look, I don't know how you're going to do it,
Mm.
but when I was in such a similar situation, I did this,
Yeah.
and this led me to this, and that was that was my path, that was my journey. If you want to know how I did it, this is the way. But if
Yeah.
you want to know how you did it, then look at your circumstances and your situation and the resources what you have, and find a way on how would you do it. But at the same time, I can only tell you how I did it, how I experienced, and from any other conversations that I've had with anyone else. Okay, this is how somebody would do it. But go around, talk to a few people, and find a better way. What works for you?
Mm.
Because my idea, what worked for me, because of the resources and the circumstances, the experience and the knowledge where I come from, it's not the same with you.
Yeah.
And it's not the where you are, it's not the same with me either. So what's going to work for you, it's not going to work for me.
Yeah.
So it's always a case. On that note, we'll leave you all with a thought of what's going to work for you. You definitely will have more insightful mindset and thoughts, provoking a lot of different questions. So do feel free to send in the messages. I'm on LinkedIn. Most of you will have James on your LinkedIn as well. So any of the questions do pop out, and we'll do another recording to bring it out back to you again. Signing off with James, I'm Bobby. Thank you, James.
No worries.